In 1944, a Viennese pediatrician named Hans Asperger worked with four boys more specifically. And these four boys weren't like the other kids he'd encountered. They lacked empathy. They could hardly hold a conversation. And when they did hold a conversation, they obsessed over one or two things and they just wouldn't stop. Hans became curious, and he studied more and more children like these four boys. And he eventually discovered that they would grow up to become professors, doctors, scientists. And in his group, there was even one individual who won a Nobel Prize in literature. Who are these kids with potentially amazing talents, but seeming to lack certain basic traits? What is Asperger's syndrome? Well, look no more, because that's what this book talk is going to be about. So for all of you on here who aren't interested in books or the subject material or anything of the sort, have a good one. But for those of you who want to learn a little bit more about it, who want to see a book come to life, and want to be slightly entertained, sit back and enjoy, because you're in for a treat. First, I'm going to start off with what Asperger's is, and the different traits and characteristics of one who has Asperger's. Second is going to be my personal opinion or my experience with it. And the third and final thing is going to be my rating for the book. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, what is Asperger's? I described some of the traits earlier, and there are many, many traits, but there are three basic things to remember about someone who has Asperger's. Number one, socially inadequate. Not a lot of social intelligence. Not great at conversation. So let's illustrate this. Pretend you're out going to a nightclub or a bar or somewhere to eat. And there's a group of 5 people in a circle. They just met. They're asking each other how their day was and about the nightlife. But then there's an individual sitting outside the circle who's curious about joining the group, but has no idea about how to enter. They can't think of the way to do it, how to come in, how to not be awkward. So that's number one. Number two, using that same illustration, this individual somehow gets into the group and everyone starts talking. However, this individual right here who just joined the group wants to talk about bugs the entire time. And he's talking to all these people about bugs, and that's all this individual wants to talk about. Everybody else in the group wants to talk about other things, and in fact, there are hints dropped about where the conversation should go. But this individual is not having it. He's not able to reciprocate. And that's number two, reciprocation of conversation. Talk about one thing, then the other person adds something else, and there's a natural flow. That's what somebody with Asperger's can't really do. And third and final one, I've kind of touched upon it a little bit, but it comes down to one or two things that they obsess about. And I mean obsessed. So let's take that individual I was talking about earlier who entered that group. That individual likes to talk about bugs. So they know everything about bugs. How they mate, where they go, what they eat, what regions they're from. He collects them. And that's all this individual wants to talk about. Unfortunately, everybody else in the group is not that obsessed. And then fortunately, they might find him a little weird. So they're going to go away. And this individual just wouldn't get it. So those are the three general characteristics of somebody who may have Asperger's. There are a few other traits too. When it comes to conversation, there is no eye contact. If anything, they won't look into the windows of the soul. They'll look at different parts like the mouth, the cheek, the nose, anything other than the eyes. When they walk, it can be a little awkward. Sometimes there's a waddle. Sometimes they're straight up and stiff. Just looking a little clumsy and uncoordinated. And then when it comes to the theory of mind, So to simplify theory of mind, it's just basically potentially putting yourself in the shoes of the person you're talking to, understanding their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions. Somebody who has Asperger's can't really do that. They can't put themselves into the other person's shoes, which can make the conversation a little awkward, unfortunately. And then when it comes to mental abilities of somebody who has Asperger's, oftentimes in school, they're very good with numbers or very good at strict subjects, but when it comes to things like literature, where you're often abstract, you have to have context behind it, a lot of kids who have Asperger's aren't necessarily that great at literature. It's more about numbers, more about statistics, generally speaking at least. And that's your general profile. Other than that, a few other big ones. One is they lack executive function. Now, what is that? Basically, let's just imagine you're the CEO of a company. So you have to control everything, right? You have to say, okay, there's paperwork to get rid of over there. There are projects to do over here. What is our company's profit? What do we need to do? What are the long-term plans? What is the big picture? And that's something that somebody with Asperger's generally doesn't have. They aren't very good at organizing. They aren't very good at looking at what they need to do to advance. They don't look at the big picture. They're often great at the nitty-gritty details, but they lack that overall big picture, unfortunately. So oftentimes, they'll have to have somebody around them, be it a parent, be it a potential girlfriend, if they have one, that helps them out with that sort of thing, because they lack it. And those are your general characteristics of somebody who has Asperger's. And in this book right here, it goes through a bunch of different things, like how they can't show emotions very well on their face. They have a hard time expressing themselves. And they're not trying to do that. They're not trying to have a lack of empathy or anything like that. That's just the way their brain works. And I love this book because there are two activities I learned from it that I find to be very useful, whether or not somebody has Asperger's or not. Heck, you could even be somebody who's just not great socially. And there are two great stories or activities you can use from this book: social stories and comic strip conversations. Now, what are those? Social stories are basically writing, once upon a time, Mary and Bob went to the park, and Bob tripped. What should Mary do? Then the person who has Asperger's tries to fill that in with their opinion. Then you have the comic strip conversations. You just imagine like little stick figures on these comic book panels, and it'll have a dialogue. And what it often asks the individual to do is to color in the conversation bubble with the emotion that the character is expressing or what they might potentially be expressing. So it helps somebody who has Asperger's get a little bit better at that theory of mind, a little bit better at understanding the other person when it comes to conversation and how they should react and respond. That was beautiful. And then another thing too is like improv. Because improv will show a lot of kids who have Asperger's how to emote, at least to imitate the emotion to potentially lead to expressing it naturally. So as far as happiness, anger, sadness, different emotions like that are great in improv, and that really helps facilitate the process with somebody who has Asperger's. Now this book right here, over 300 pages long, tons of sources in it. But that's my brief rundown of somebody who has Asperger's. Now, what does this book mean to me? It's a couple reasons. One, in the present moment, I work with individuals, many of them who have Asperger's. And we help teach and we coach them. And it's been really good because I do see where the awkwardness is, but I see the great potential in them. I see how quick they latch onto things. I see how that childlike innocence that many of them have is endearing and can lead to great conversations. And it's a wonderful thing to see them come from somebody who can't have a conversation to somebody who can begin to have these conversations and potentially flourish. I enjoy it. And it's not just somebody who has Asperger's, it's really anybody. Because I came from a place where I couldn't hold a conversation. In fact, when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I actually got tested to see if I had Asperger's. And the clinician himself, he ended up saying that I didn't have it, but I exhibited many of the traits of somebody who has Asperger's. I was obsessed with statistics and facts and books, and I could list off all the stats of NBA and NFL players. I was kind of awkward in conversations. So that's why my family thought, I might have it. But I ended up not having it. And I think that's why I'm also very keen on working with these kids, because I'm not one who has it, but I feel like I'm very close to who they are. So I like seeing them come into themselves and demonstrate their potential to become more independent and to make the impact they want in their life and the world. So with that being said, what is my rating for the book? I'm very generous. I'm going to give it a 9.5. Lots and lots of information. It was written in 2007, but much of this book still is current. And yes, even though it deals with the DSM-4, which is not the latest version of the book necessary, very useful, great introduction, and it definitely can kickstart your wonder and your research when it comes to people with Asperger's or any other symptoms. Now, why don't I give it a perfect 10? It's because it doesn't have a lot of pictures. And let's just say I was someone who had Asperger's and I wanted to learn about it. There's plenty of information in words. There are many who have Asperger's who like to see pictures or who think purely in pictures. So it would have been nice to see a lot of pictures in there. But that's really like a knick-knack, tic-tac thing. Other than that, amazing read. Tony Atwood, I'd like to thank you. Appreciate the book. Appreciate all of you who are watching. Or if it's just one person, I appreciate you. Other than that, that is my book review, my book talk for The Complete Guide to Asperger's Syndrome by Tony Atwood. Feel free to send me comments, tell me what's good, tell me what I can improve, because I'm always looking to bring books to life and to get better at my storytelling. So until next time, guys, have a good one.